Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the iHeartRadio network, the number one network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports have been voted the number one sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. And, of course, you good old boys up in Canada. I hope that cheers you up because I know the NHL is gone from Canada. So hopefully you good old boys are laughing about that. But you know there's still no one I love more than you good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Big C, you guys have a crazy president. How's it going for you good old boys down south, Big C? Yeah.
You know, we got your boys playing a little basketball a little closer here to the south than they are out there on the west coast.
Oh, yeah.
Things may change tonight in Cleveland, but it's hot down here in the south. I mean, we had 3 days of rain, Jonathan, and somebody flipped on the oven and everything, and now all of a sudden it's 90 degrees.
Yeah, it's always 90 degrees down south, Big C. At least that's how it feels with all that humdidity you good old boys have going on down south. I want to say today is a beautiful day. It is June 7th, 2017. And we have a few things to talk about, Big C. Of course, we have the NBA Finals going on tonight. I feel so happy. I got a phone call from Las Vegas. I didn't put any money on the line, but I do know who's going to win, according to the guy that called me last time. But I said, fool me 5 times, shame on me. Fool me 6 times, shame on you. So he's not getting my money this time. And you know the NHL can't wait for that to keep playing because we have a tie series in that. And that's going back to Pittsburgh. You know, baseball's still in the swing of things. A lot of good things happening. But some breaking news outside of POTUS. We'll get on POTUS a little bit later. But them good old boys down south, I guess one national championship for Bob Stoops wasn't enough, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, ironically, Jonathan, 19 years at the University of Oklahoma, and Bob Stoops steps down today.
Yeah.
You know, a marvelous career at the University of Oklahoma, and, you know, everybody always says he couldn't win. But,
yeah.
You know, the guy had 10 consecutive 10-win seasons there at Oklahoma, Jonathan. You know, he had 2 Heisman Trophy winners,
yeah.
19 consecutive All-Americans, and all he did was win year in, year out. I mean, he would generally lose a big game early in the season, something that would knock him out of national championship contention, but he's only 56 years old. You know, this is what we saw with Urban Meyer, Jonathan, when he stepped down in Florida.
Yeah.
And, you know, the pressure on coaches to win all the time, not be consistent, but to win all the time.
Yeah.
And think about the unbounded pressure institution, in Oklahoma. He stepped in behind Barry Switzer, did a very admirable job there at the University of Oklahoma, keeping them in the top 10 on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
You know, basically avoiding any scandal. You know, when players needed to be disciplined, he did that. He was a man to step up and not hide players.
Yeah.
He coached with integrity. But, you know, as you look at it, this coaching carousel, coaches not lasting and to last almost 2 decades at an instant.
Oh, yeah.
That's a marvelous turn for Bob Stoops.
And you know, Big C, when you think about it, think about how many coaches, their biggest rival is not Oklahoma State, it's really Texas. Think about the Red River Shootout down there, good old South in the South. And now, Big C, he's outlasted. I know Mac Brown at Texas, which won a national championship back in 2005. But Mac Brown also played for another national championship, and they lost that one to Alabama. I think that was in the Rose Bowl when they had McCoy that got injured on the play. But Texas, they had their glory days, but old boy was coaching against them guys back in the day, Big C. So to last that long, I just think he's too good a coach not to come back. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him back on the sidelines. If not this year, maybe next year. Does anyone know why he stepped down? Or is it personal reasons? I don't think he got fired. But, I mean, for him, there might be just some more money hanging out there someplace else. Big C, your thoughts? Yeah.
He needed a rest. And, I mean, you think about it. You go on a grind for almost 20 years. Not only are you coaching, but you're recruiting, you're replenishing your staff.
Yeah.
You know, staff members move on, and, and that recruiting battle year in and year out.
Yeah.
To stay in the top 20 recruiting class nationally, and he did that consistently. But, there comes a time in anybody's life, and when you look at anybody who's been on a job
Yeah.
This guy is time for retirement.
Yeah. Yeah.
We always think of coaches in an immortality way, Charlton, that they'll never go away. You think about Bill Walsh when all of a sudden he just stepped down
Yeah.
as coach of the 49ers after winning a Super Bowl. And people are like, wow, how can he walk away and he still has something left?
Yeah.
There's been many of coaches, Charlton, on every level, whether it's college basketball, college football, NBA, NHL, NFL. When coaches want to go, they can go.
Yeah.
And they're not tied to the fans. The fans feel that they all belong to them.
Yeah.
But how can you walk away from us with the success that you have?
Yep.
There's many of those fans that rave about the success. There's always that handful that's always crying and bickering when you didn't win enough.
Yeah, that's always true.
Wasn't enough this year. 11 games wasn't enough.
Yeah.
To play in 10 major bowl games, that wasn't enough. But when you look at the ledger of all the universities across the country, Thomas, they all haven't done it. He's played in the national championship series.
Yeah.
And he's played for national championships. So, he's had a very lustrous career at the University of Oklahoma.
Yeah, and you did.
A lot of people over the past couple of years will call for his head.
Yeah.
But, to have the ability to walk away from a situation on your own, when you pick the time.
Yeah.
That is the greatest thing of an athlete or anybody who's involved in athletics to say, hey, I'm choosing the time that I walk away. I'm not having it dictated to me and somebody walk into my office and say, you gotta go.
Yeah, and we know what that's like. I think everybody's been through that. One of the things about staying on top, Big C, is everybody's trying to chase you. Speaking of chasing you, this segment is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. Big C, I remember you talked about the great Oklahoma program back in the day where they had Billy Sims, they had Marcus Dupree, there's a kid that played quarterback, Jamel Holloway, that came out of Carson, California. He replaced Troy Aikman, but Troy Aikman broke his leg playing in the game against the University of Miami. And we know Troy Aikman went on to UCLA with the help of Terry Donahue and became an All-American throwing the football at UCLA as opposed to running the wishbone at Oklahoma. Talk about some of the history of Oklahoma, because they're going to have a new coach, and he can't just be a neophyte. He's going to have to be somebody who understands the tradition of Oklahoma and the players that have been out there leading the Oklahoma Charge. Big C, your thoughts? Yeah.
And so he's very well impressed with programs and players that are in the system. And he knows the history and the lineage of Oklahoma. When you think about Oklahoma, you go back to Ben Wilkerson in the 50s. Ben Wilkerson set the NCAA record for the longest winning streak of a college football game at 56 consecutive wins. And, he went on to be a great broadcaster with ABC Sports.
Yeah.
And then later on, he was followed up by Barry Switzer.
Yeah.
Who set the table at Oklahoma with great defenses. I mean, everybody knows about the Boz.
Oh, yeah.
Even before the Boz, they had the Selman brothers, Leroy and Dewey Selman. They were all Americans that had long careers in the NFL. Matter of fact, Leroy Selman was the #1 overall drafted in the NFL by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah.
And a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
But, this is a program that has been known for the great running back. Steve Owens was the first Heisman Trophy winner at Oklahoma back in the 60s, and followed up by Billy Sims, Joey Washington, one of the great running backs. As a matter of fact, they played in the game of the century that people call many years ago, back in 71, between Nebraska and Oklahoma. That game was won by Nebraska on a great punt return by the Johnny Rodgers, who went on to win the Heisman.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
When he was at Nebraska. But, when you think about this program over the years, you talked about the running backs, Billy Sims, the Heisman Trophy winner. Marcus Dupree never reached his promise, but showed a lot of flash when he was there as a freshman.
Adrian Peterson.
The former #1 draft pick of the Miami Dolphins back in the late 70s.
Yeah.
We've had a lineage of running backs. We've seen Joe Mixon go in the second round of 6.5 years.
Look at Adrian Peterson, also his career.
But, far as being an athlete at Oklahoma, you talked about Troy Aikman. I think about J.C. Watts. J.C. Watts, who led them to a national championship, who went on to be a congressman. And that shows how politics and sports crosses over. That you're not only a great athlete, but you become a great representative of society in the state of Oklahoma when J.C. Watts was elected to Congress, showing that it's not just athletics, but it's mentality. But, this program has been left in great shape, Charlton, at Oklahoma. The
Yeah.
They had a great recruiting class, and having the offensive coordinator step up, being the head coach, there'll be no hiccups in the Oklahoma program. They may even progress, Charlton, having a new breath of fresh air.
New fresh breath there. Also, you're talking about the politician that went out to be, serving in Congress, serve the country, how politics and sports always works together. And I want to bring up this thing that you mentioned about the Boz, because Brian Bosworth, he became a media image that Oklahoma tried to push out there. Being Caucasian didn't hurt him. His NFL career didn't merit the attention he got over some of the other guys, like a Keith Jackson, was a tight end in the NFL for several years, and also just a lot of the other players that you already mentioned. But the thing about Oklahoma football is, if you go to the city of Norman, it's not like going to L.A. It's not like going to Austin, Texas, or Dallas, Texas, or Miami, Florida. They got 3 now. When I went there, they had 4, so they added another stoplight since I've been through there. But when you look at Norman and you look at the body of work that university has produced, Big C, I just think it's a testament that they've done it for so many years. And no matter what you like about Big Ten football or Big 12 football or Pac-12 or SEC or ACC, Oklahoma has been pretty much in that same conference, while so many other great powers have aligned different places. If you look at what Miami's done, they've been in several conferences over the years. And, of course, Nebraska, one of their arch rivals back in the day, along with Texas, Nebraska went to the Big Ten now, which has like 19, they have 21 schools in the Big Ten, Big C, something like that. But so Oklahoma, they've been the staple for that conference. Even though a lot of people, they thought that Oklahoma was going to move to the Pac-12 at one time, there's still some talk of them becoming a part of the SEC conference, where they'll have a super conference. I think that would be a mistake for college football to have maybe 4 powerful conferences, because you still need that tradition. It's almost like back in the day when Ali fought Sonny Liston. It was classes clear at that time. Even Ali changed his name. Oklahoma's been the same in that same conference, and playing arguably not the best non-conference schedule, but they have gone out and tested some very tough teams last year. They brought in Ohio State, which beat them pretty soundly, but they had a reputation, Big C, of playing big every year, and they've turned out so many great college football programs, as you mentioned. As you talk about that at Oklahoma, let me ask you this question, though. As a former player, Big C, is it fair to his players that he recruited last year that he's leaving 2 months before a kickoff, Big C? Your thoughts?
We talk about fairness of players.
Yeah.
At the universities. When a university fires a coach, is it fair to the players that were there? When a coach leaves, like Tom Herman left Houston last year and went to Texas as soon as they lost their last game.
Yeah.
Is that fair? This is a scenario for Bob Stoops where he's resigning. It's not that he's walking away leaving the players trouble, because he's leaving the coaching staff intact.
Yeah.
His players know to help recruit this team that's there, trouble. The freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors.
Yeah.
They're all familiar with the coaching staff, so it's not like you're going in, bringing in an entirely new coaching staff saying the system is going to change. What we've done in the past, or what you've done in the past, no longer exists.
Yeah.
Because this is my program, my style. They still have the same quarterback in Baker Mayfield. He's still going to be there under the tutelage of the offensive coordinator, who is now the head coach.
Yeah.
They're going to run the same scheme. So those players on offense, there will be no change.
Yeah.
Oklahoma had a very solid offense, very resound.
Yeah.
And so they're going to go out and they're going to be competitive. I think one of the things that the players that are left over, Charlton, will do is that they will go out and play even harder in respect to Bob Stoops bringing them there.
Yeah.
Understanding that they wanted to give him something that he left and show him how good they still are.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that often happens when a coach leaves, Charlton, is that program is left behind. We've seen it in the NFL when Dundee left Tampa Bay and Tampa won a Super Bowl.
Yeah. Yeah.
This has happened before, that coaches have gone in and won. Tyronn Lue, when he won last year in Cleveland. You walk in, Steve Kerr, we've seen that with him in Golden State. You walk in where a coach is left, and I think that the players always play harder to let that coach know who left, that we're still the same great team we were that you built.
Yeah, and when you talk about that, I know when people think football down in the South, okay, Oklahoma down there in the Panhandle. When people think about the Crimson, they think about Alabama. But Oklahoma has been more consistent than Alabama, since Barry Switzer took over down there. And then they had this long run of almost a decade with Stoops. So all the kids that love Oklahoma football, I've known several people that played for OU. There will always be that ability to recruit some of the top athletes in the country to go to that part of the country where it's really not, I'm not going to say it's a bad place, but it's just not LA. It's not New York. It's not San Francisco. It's not Texas. They have their own history, their own type of winning Big C, and I think people welcome in everybody that comes into that program from all over the country. Again, we talked about some of the great players. I think Henrietta, Oklahoma produced the great Troy Aikman, but Carson, California produced Jamel Holloway, which helped them win a national championship back in the day when they beat Penn State. So I don't think they'll have a hard time recruiting as long as they keep that system intact. Big C, also, when we look at the world of college football, we know there's a lot of players right now, and they're getting ready. I guess they had their spring balls already over because everybody's out right now. There's still some talk, though, of these 7-on-7 leagues for high schools, and they're doing it, and they're getting the recruits, the schools to come and recruit these athletes at the 7-on-7s. I just want to ask you, do you still agree with that, or do you think it's a bad thing because colleges like Oklahoma, they recruit year-round. It's not just a football season thing. Your thought on this 7-on-7 stuff that's gaining popularity all over the country, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Jonathan, when you look at it, it's purely economic. Well, when you can bring a couple dozen coaches into a scenario where they're all in one place instead of having to visit 30 different households, it makes it economically feasible and sensible to do this, to have these 7-on-7s, because what you see with these young athletes, Charlton, is how they interact versus other athletes. What they're going to be adjusting to on the college campus. So, I mean, everything evolves when you look at sports. The modernization of everything, advancement. You can't go back and go to every high school campus around the country and say, well, let me see some game tape on the guy, because you don't have the chance to hit these Friday night games and then be at your game on Saturday. It's just not, logistically solid for college coaches to have to make these runs all around the country. So if you could bring in 100 of the top youth in these positions of the 7-on-7 position players at one time, and all of a sudden you get a couple dozen universities coming in looking, it makes it very easy to offer scholarships to these players on the spot versus going in, taking someone's word saying this guy's a great player and he doesn't pan out. This is what's the thing that occurs with high school athletes. You hear about these legends because he's greater than everybody that's ever been around. But he goes to a college campus and he gets lost, Charlton. This happens more often than not. You think about the average program, the average major college program, Charlton, it brings in 25 to 30 kids a year. That's a lot of kids that you bring in. So if you don't have to visit that many homes, Charlton, to bring these kids in, that's an economic advantage for the university. We're making a lot of money off the kids anyway. But it becomes an economic advantage, and you're not wasting the kids' recruiting trips. This is the key, because you only get 6 recruiting trips when you're coming out of high school. So if you can get all the coaches in one place, and then as a player, you can decide which universities you really
want to travel to.
Based on the interview that you've given to the coaches at the 7-on-7 campus, Charles.
And last year, I think it was Coach Harbaugh, 2 years ago, when he took a lot of flack for going down to Florida. I think they chartered a plane and took the team actually down to Florida for just a way for people to come and see what University of Michigan football is all about. And just like Michigan, Oklahoma is one of those what you call heritage schools where their athletic budget brings in over $100 million, primarily based on OU football. And that's something that's not going to go away because TV revenue will not go away. And there's some of the schools that can benefit from that. So whatever they have to do to gain that advantage, we've seen schools, we've seen Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh comes to California not to visit Stanford or San Francisco 49ers where he was coaching, Big C, but to put on high school clinics. So I'm sure maybe that's something that Stoops did or did not do. I know the college ranks is turning up the pressure on recruiting, and we're going to see more and more of that happening all over the country, Big C.
Well, we're talking, you talk about the college ranks turning up pressure. You got to look at the University of Mississippi, turning up the pressure on the Supreme down at the University of Mississippi.
Oh, really?
Him today
Really?
Improper recruiting, academic violations, and potential money payouts to recruits, Charlton, down at the University of Mississippi. Now, this is a program that, has risen fast over the past 5 years.
Yeah.
Alabama twice, and sometimes people think you'll get a pass because you've beaten Alabama.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they can withstand this because the allegations came out 2 years ago when players like Laramie Tunsil were seen smoking marijuana on draft night with the gas mask overseas.
Yeah.
2 weeks prior to that, Robert Namichi had fallen out of a second-story hotel window in Atlanta, and Tunsil was in the room with him, and he was alleged to have had synthetic marijuana in his system. And also, Tunsil said, through some text that he had sent and voice messages to assistant coaches.
Wow.
He was motivated some bills paid while he was at the University of Mississippi.
Yeah.
So you think about the rise of the Mississippi program, and you come from nowhere, and you have one of the top 5 recruiting classes in the nation 3 years ago.
Yep.
That leads to question marks. How all of a sudden you're at nobody university in the SEC, and you have a top 5 recruiting class. All of a sudden, in this program rises, and you beat Alabama twice.
Yeah.
Maybe even Nick Saban.
I wonder where that phone call came from, Big Z.
But these are some of the things that, have always troubled college sports.
Yeah.
And you wonder, not just with Mississippi, but how many college programs are clean? We saw the improprieties that went on at Baylor that cost Browns his job with the functioning program there.
Yeah.
In the stats and even money payments. And we've seen that throughout the history of college football.
Yeah.
Where allegations has risen. And now with social media and everybody who can get out there, Charlton, and talk about certain things, it's not much that you can hide anymore when improprieties go on in any sport.
Well, Big C, I think also it just goes on when people want to win. And speaking of winning, sports is a billion-dollar industry, and boys and girls sports is the foundation to this billion-dollar industry. For every athletic event, you need insurance. You can get it through Big C Sports. We go through Ben and Mark. They've been around for half a century. Tweet out to Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network. We cover whether you're a pro athlete, a collegiate team, high schools, even your mom and pop soccer leagues. Tweet out to Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network. Follow us on Twitter at YesCharlton, and follow Big C Sports for athletic and event insurance. But Big C, I just want to bring up this point. As somebody's racing by with a dragster down here downtown Sacramento, I know a lot of the good old boys in Cleveland. There's so much going on, but I'm telling you, and I love basketball. I think it's my second favorite sport behind football. But I'm telling you, Sue, what you just said about Mississippi, I think that's the old Archie Manning played at Mississippi back in the day. And you think about how they get such great players. I'm not saying anything wrong is going on. I know up at Oregon, there was about 3 stoplights going through Corvallis. Now Oregon State, they have, I think, 2 national championships in baseball in the last decade. And we know Oregon's had a meteoric rise in all their sports. Those are small markets, too, a lot like Norman. And I'm not sure what cities Mississippi State's in. Is it Starkville, I think? Or
It's Oxford, Mississippi.
Oxford, Mississippi. So you know, down in the SEC, the pressure's big. But there are also a lot of good athletes. Everybody's not going to go to Alabama. They're not all going to go to Georgia or Florida or Tennessee. So some of the times when the young or the older schools that win all the time, like you say, heritage schools, a lot of the good old boys at the upstart schools, they know what it takes to compete. I know it's not popular to say, but they see what the big boys are doing, Big C. And I'm not too surprised at all to see they're trying to keep up. Does that make any sense, Big C?
Well, Charlton, nobody on the top wants to be chased or even pushed to the side.
Yeah.
And they're going to do everything that they can in their powers. I mean, to have allegations and leaks come out, half of it comes from your competition all the time, Charlton.
Yeah.
It's not from an outside entity. It's that people that you have dealt with.
Yeah.
Because they've seen you do what they have done. And if they tell on you first, then it takes the pressure off of them.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say there's been several improprieties at Mississippi. I mean, when you got players, social media where you're smoking weed,
yeah.
Another player falling out of a window, you got players going to a university that, when you think about it, I remember when Nemiki was there. He was the top defensive lineman in the country. All of a sudden, he's in Mississippi.
Yeah.
And people are like, wow, he's out of Georgia.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, he's in Mississippi. Top lineman in the country at the University of Georgia there. You got
Yeah.
But all of a sudden he's in Mississippi, and people are like, wow, how is he going there?
Yep.
And we've seen that over time. I mean, even the great Patrick Lewis, middle linebacker for the 49ers,
Yeah.
who had an illustrious career and retired after 8 years, was out of the University of Mississippi. Eli Manning, the interception king of the NFL, is out of the University of Mississippi.
Yeah.
There's all some great players out of that university, Charles. And they turned around the program the past couple of years. But when you turn around a program too fast, a lot of people start paying attention to you. When you've been the doormat of the conference,
Yeah.
and now all of a sudden you're playing on New Year's Day,
Yeah.
where you've never done that in the last 25, 30 years, but back-to-back years, and then you beat Alabama 2 out of 4 years.
That'll get the end.
It raises a lot of red flags when you beat Alabama. Like, hey, this has occurred.
I wonder if
People in that red state said, hey, look a little bit.
That's funny, Big Z. As you know, I mean, I just love sports, and I heard some good old boys say, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. So hopefully with Oklahoma football, we'll still see that tradition strong. I still remember back in the day watching USC football play the Oklahoma Sooners. Always one of my favorite games back in the day for those intersectional rivalries, along with USC playing Notre Dame. But seeing Oklahoma in that Texas game every year, no matter who's coaching, it's always must-see football. And as you talk about Ole Miss, they're trying to compete with Alabama and Florida, and a lot of them good old boys. So whatever happens down there, I know a lot of people do a lot of things, and sometimes if you give them enough moonshine, Big C, nobody seems to find out. Maybe they stop giving that barrel that they used to hand out, if you understand what I'm saying. But I want to just touch on something, Big C, before we close tonight. And I know we have a lot of talk about this NBA Finals game coming up. Will it be something that says this is a 3-0 game? I mean, if it goes that way, I'm hearing different things coming out of Las Vegas. But if it does go 3-0, and there's so many people making comparisons, even the great Magic Johnson said there's no way that this Golden State Warriors team could have beat Showtime. You have Scottie Pippen, who didn't even want to go in a game when the last play was called for Kukoc when Jordan retired. He's saying they couldn't beat the Bulls, at least the ones where Michael Jordan played. I just want to ask you your thoughts. Is this game ripe? It's a 3-point favorite, right, for Golden State. 3 points after their last 2 games combined 40 points, right? What do you look at tonight, Big C? What do you think's happening?
What I look at tonight, John, is the Golden State still playing the same tempo that they played. The pressure's on Cleveland. Cleveland can't slow down the ball because they don't have the people to run a slow down, posted up offense. Only player that they have to run a post up is LeBron James.
Yeah.
And so once you put LeBron James in the post, you take all the other offensive weapons out of the equation. You no longer can have Kyrie Irving penetrate the paint.
Yeah.
Because now he's moving in on LeBron's territory.
Yeah.
LeBron has been taken off the three-point arc. He can no longer drive to the basket. He may be able to back somebody down, but I think they would put a bigger body on him if he did try to back down into the paint. But, this is one of those games that, Cleveland has to find their shot. I mean, we've always heard about home cooking in sports.
Yeah.
Cleveland has, you think about it, they scored 119 points in the last game, okay?
Yeah. And they still lost.
They scored 119 points in the playoffs prior to that game and won.
Yeah.
You think about it. Every team up until that last game that had scored at least 119 points had won the game.
Yeah.
But this just shows the offensive paralysis of Golden State right now.
Yeah.
You have to find a way to get them off their shot.
Yep.
And that hasn't been done. Cleveland got very physical in this last game. But you think about it, you forced 20 turnovers of a team, and you still lose by 19 points. So
Yeah.
that's amazing. That shows how good this team can shoot the basketball. But I always like the comparison that you brought up at the start of this, Charlton, when we talk about eras.
Yeah.
I mean, that has always gone on throughout the time of sports evolution. Everybody, because everybody discounts the great Boston Celtics team. Say, well, that was a different era.
Yeah.
They won 8 consecutive titles, but that was a different time. Chicago won 6. That was a different time. Golden State, no one has equaled the success, in these eras of those teams. But the athleticism has also changed over the years. We always want to find guys who can play in any era.
Yeah.
And you'll always find that.
Yeah.
But, the team equation is always something different. Lakers will always say, no one can play with Showtime. Oh, they lost a few championships.
Yeah.
I remember them losing to Boston,
Yeah.
Philadelphia,
Yeah.
So they were not invincible when you think about it. Now, Chicago won 6. They didn't lose any. But everybody else was not invincible, Charlton. Even the great Celtics team
Yeah.
lost championships. The Lakers lost championships even before Showtime.
Yeah.
The New York Knicks. Every team throughout an era, has lost. Houston only had a 2-year run with the Great Elijah one. But think about San Antonio. They have won 5, but they've lost almost as many also, Charlton.
Yeah.
So when you talk about teams throughout eras, there's no perfect team. And there's no perfect equation. On any given night, any of these great teams from any era could probably knock off another one, Charlton.
Yeah.
You never saw, Chicago go 13-0 and 14-0 in the playoffs, okay?
No.
You didn't see that. So we're in uncharted territory. The closest it ever came was Philadelphia when Moses said 4-4-4.
Yeah. And Moses had the right to say what he wanted to say, as big as Moses Malone was, Big C.
I didn't know whether that was Moses or
Yeah, I'm sure when you're having that moonshine, I wonder if Moses from the Bible drank moonshine also, but we'll leave that up to God to determine that. Big C, I want to get your final thoughts on something before we close out, because I want to keep the integrity of our program. I was watching a little bit on CNN, and they were talking about POTUS and how there's actually, his son-in-law is being thrown under the bus. Pfizer might be stepping aside. They're saying that, good old boy might step down as the Attorney General also. So much turmoil going on in the White House. We just talked about colleges and how when you're competing and sometimes you're the small program and you step up and start winning, and the good old boys start making phone calls to the NCAA. Well, we see a lot of that happening in the White House also. I think you're the first one that said this back in the day, right around the holidays. You said that Donald Trump is giving Kushner a job because he needs a fall guy. I think you found his fall guy, Big C. Your thoughts? Yeah.
But he knew that he was that guy that had that liaison between the other side of Russia and the U.S.
Yeah.
And because he didn't give him a political appointment, he thought that it would keep him clean and doing that.
Yeah.
But you're a direct line to the president. And when you look at Donald Trump, he's tried to keep a close-knit circle of people. And this is the most understaffed White House in history.
Yeah.
Because Donald Trump is trying to keep quiet everything that he's doing. And if he had the full staff that could help the country operate, then, the country would run a lot more smoother. But he's been so busy trying to cover his back end.
Oh, yeah.
He's been elected, Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, and you think about the shakeup that they constantly talk about with the staff. Jared Kushner, there's no secret what he has done through his communication with the Russians.
He's crooked, Big C. They call it crooked back in the hood, okay? He's crooked.
Trump says, we've never done any business with Russia.
Yeah.
We don't have any ties. We have no buildings with Russia.
Right.
And when you can come on television and blatantly lie like that.
Yeah.
And here it is. He used to run the Miss Universe department, and he was in Russia.
Yeah.
He had ties, business ties in Russia, but it's thought that they've never had any business dealings in Russia.
Yeah.
But yet, TV, if anybody ever watched television, and I know you guys do it now,
Google it.
you've seen this. And so to make those type of statements, and here it is, his son-in-law, who is part of the family, had dealings with Russia.
Yeah.
And Trump has had also, Trump, he's been to Russia many times. He knows Putin and everybody over there.
Oh, yeah. He owns...
Have Flynn as his national security chief.
Yeah.
He dealt with Russia, so that meant that he had conversations with Trump.
Yep.
So all of these things, the thing that, like, when we were talking about Sears and Kmart yesterday,
Yeah.
all of those people who worked for those stores who voted for Trump.
Yeah.
And now they're sitting there wondering, will Trump come to them? No, he's not. He's not interested in those people, Trump.
Yeah.
All he wanted was their vote. And now he's going to turn their back on them like he has turned his back on the United States of America, more worried about his family and his own pocket.
Well,
those people now will have to go on the unemployment line. And as they talk about all these Americans that are on these entitlement programs,
yeah.
how do you tell those people from the 78 stores that are going to be closing soon that you're not entitled to your unemployment?
Yeah. I tell you, Big C, there's on the Intelligence Committee, his name is Andre Carson. He's on the Intelligence Committee in Washington, and he's talking about Trump and a lot of things that are happening behind the backgrounds. They're saying this is like Watergate all over again. But a lot of things, Trump thinks he can fire everybody that knows something. There's a girl out of Augusta, Georgia. She's in jail right now because she gave some information to the media outlet, that less information than what Kushner's given to Putin and what Donald Trump has given to Putin. She's in jail. Okay, she's in jail, Big C. But I think a lot of things are about to drop, at least. We have this conference coming up on Thursday, but there's just so much going on. I still hope our country can stay safe. We talk about NFL football. We talked about University of Oklahoma football. And we know we have these good old boys that are going to play a basketball game tonight. I feel so confident in the news that I got out of Las Vegas, but they're still not going to get my money. Big C, what are you looking forward to as we close out the show, Big C? Go right ahead, sir.
I'm looking for an intriguing game tonight. That's what I'm looking for. I expect for Cleveland to come out with guns blazing.
Yeah.
They're going to have to run a high-tempo game at the start. They cannot slow down. They cannot back off. I see this team being aggressive from the opening tip, Jonathan, because they've shown some passionate at times in the series.
Yeah.
And they can't do that. Whoever they bring off the bench, and I think that's going to be a key. Because Tyronn Lue needs to utilize more of his bench. He's been pretty stagnant as far as his rotation.
Yeah.
And that has hurt him trying to keep up with Golden State. This is a team that goes 10 deep. And Tyronn has not done that consistently. He needs to also, Charlton, utilize timeouts more.
Yeah.
Because this team needs a rest. I mean, you got these 20s and you got these 2-minute timeouts. Don't just wait on the commercial timeouts. Give LeBron and the rest of the team some rest.
Yeah.
Because you don't do that. Golden State is just going to blow them off the blocks, Charlton. So utilize every timeout. There's no need in going into the locker room with a timeout. Because they don't roll over.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
There's no need in ending the game with timeouts. They don't roll over.
Yeah.
So that's one of the most strategic things that a coach can do. When you see Golden State on a 6-7 point run, call timeout. Don't let them make it 12 or 13.
Yeah.
You want to stay in the ball game, Charlton.
Well, Big C, that makes a lot of sense. And for everybody watching the game tonight, pay attention to the calls. Just a little insight from Las Vegas, okay? Them good old boys were calling me. They said, Curry, pay attention to the calls, the number of calls. In fact, he called me Curry. He said, are you related to Steph Curry? I said, yeah, we're related somehow back in the day, Big C. I'm sure they can Google that too. I want to say every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide. Follow Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network, the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never any reason for domestic violence. If you see any woman in trouble, just call 911 so no one has to deal with that garbage all on her own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports program, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.